Hello everyone, welcome to Fabric Executive Insights. Today I'm here with Shireesh Thota, who leads all of Azure databases within Microsoft. Shireesh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, Sweta. I'm Shireesh Thota, Corporate Vice President for Azure Databases. So I run everything on the operational side, OLTP systems, SQL Server, Azure SQL, Cosmos DB, Postgres MySQL. I've been with Microsoft for a long time, and the only thing that I've been doing is databases. So I love databases.
Wonderful. So that's a big responsibility. So let's get started with the big picture.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the big shift with how databases are coming together.
Yeah, so a lot's happening in the era of AI. Obviously there's a lot of excitement with in how we have evolved from the statistical ML to generative AI, now to agentic AI. So this is an amazing amount of disruption that's coming across the board, and I think that will apply to databases as well. But when you talk about the biggest disruptions, I always want to begin with some things that's not changing, and then talk about things that are changing. Things that are not changing are to do with everything about resiliency and security. Databases are foremost all about making sure that they can keep the data, keep it secure, make sure that we can really deliver the value back to the customers whenever they need to retrieve it efficiently, right? So doing all of that stuff efficiently, reliably, that's not going away, right?
Correct.
And making sure that the data is secure, that's not going away. And these are the holy promises of a database, not changing. What's changing is really how customers think about data platforms instead of thinking about individual siloed products. They really want to ensure that the end-to-end flow of data is fully connected. So one of the biggest challenges of the data platforms, or rather any enterprise customer, is that the time it takes, not just the time, the effort and the time it takes for the data to go from the place where it is born to the place where it can be analyzed and you can gather insights is too much.
Correct.
The effort is high, the time it takes is high, and they really want to compress all of that stuff into a significantly much lower value, much lower effort, much higher outcomes out of it and all that stuff, right? And so for that, you really need an integrated environment, that can stitch all these pieces together, really letting you get all the value without you having to do too much of an effort, right? And this is what the data platforms are all about. We are very focused on that. And this is the reason why you see, we pushing Fabric quite a bit. And Fabric, obviously, is a pre-integrated SaaS environment. It has custom-built, like sort of tailor-made requirements that we address for every persona. And at the same time, you have best of breed. Right? So you'd have real-time data engineering, data science, real-time analytics, all the way to Power BI. But now bringing in operational databases into Fabric makes it a unified data platform. So that's a big shift. The final shift, I would say, obviously has to do with AI. It's a very important shift. The kind of challenges that you'd have in databases, the traditional, typical challenges, are not changing in terms of storing them efficiently, querying them, and all that stuff. That's not changing, and we continue to advance that art. But there is a place where there's a lot of grunt work that goes into managing your database estate. People don't manage a single application. They're dealing with quite a lot of stuff. And so, how do you really take all the AI progress and apply it to the traditional roles of a database? Things around making sure that your patching is happening all the time, your backups are really flowing in, your security posture is good, compliance is good, your performance optimization is good. So all of that stuff can now be enhanced with AI. And then, ultimately, databases will have a really big role to play in the era of AI because of what they can do for applications.
Wonderful.
So all these applications, when you're building with AI, need state, they need memory. All of that stuff are there inside databases. And when you hear about patterns like RAG, it's all about really retrieving the data from databases, marrying it with the power of LLM, and then really giving more value to the application. So all of that stuff is not possible without a good database. So these are all like really important shifts that are happening. We are at the forefront of this revolution, very excited.
Perfect. So you really brought both these things together well, Shireesh, because let's talk about fundamentals. No matter how far you want to run with AI, you need to get your data act together, and security posture is predominantly what customers really look for. Trust is what Microsoft invests a lot in. So you touched both on the security posture as well as trust in what we are building from a product portfolio perspective. Now let's talk about the latest announcements. Yesterday, as part of the keynote, everybody got excited about Database Hub in Fabric. Talk to us about it.
as I said, the difference between a single application and multiple applications and multiple databases and multiple environments is massive. Most of our enterprise customers, they're not dealing with a single application. They're dealing with multitude
Absolutely.
of applications. They're dealing with heterogeneous environments. They're dealing with on-premises databases in the cloud, both in PaaS form as SaaS form, and a whole lot of other things in terms of really dealing with not just one database. They have a variety of databases. Now, they have multiple challenges. You have things such as database health. These signals are scattered. Oftentimes, the issues are surfaced long after the customer is already seeing the impact. Your monitoring as a problem. Monitoring really is a different ballgame when you have a one database versus hundreds of databases, thousands of databases. These alerts can get inconsistent, and it becomes very important for these teams to have a consistent view of all these heterogeneous environments. And then there is the case of enterprise security. That's a big deal because even a single database that's not correctly patched can become a massive sort of a weak link in the entire security posture. And so this is where patching policies, compliance becomes a big deal. And this is the reason why I've introduced Database Hub in Microsoft Fabric. So Database Hub is a comprehensive interface for managing and really running all your operations of a database smoothly. So you get unified visibility, governance, centralized sort of security posture, observability, all of that for all your databases. It's not just the databases in Fabric. Even if your database is on premises in SQL Server somewhere else, could be anywhere. It could be in the cloud, in the PaaS form. No matter, you basically get all of these benefits in the hub. And we're very excited about Hub because it basically brings all these cool things, not just in a traditional way. It's not just a portal. It brings all the ability for you to manage, deploy, spin up these things in few seconds. Most importantly, we're very excited about agents.
Wonderful.
Right?
Yes.
Agents are going to make it much more easier to solve all these challenges. So it's a very exciting, brave new world.
Wonderful. So for folks who haven't seen the keynote or missed out on what Shireesh is talking about, check out the demo that Charles Webb did. It has got some phenomenal things that you can see on what is happening in the database hub within Fabric. Now, you already touched on the agents. That was my follow-up question because we talk about bringing all these things together. But how does agents act on all the databases that are landing into Fabric, especially with the advent of Database Hub in Fabric? How are database agents coming together?
See, let's begin by defining what an agent is to start with, and then I'll connect it with database agents. So ultimately, agents are basically, systems that basically can take an LLM model, can take a set of instructions, and then if you empower them with a set of tools, LLM, instruction, and tools, if you give all these three things to an agent, it autonomously, on its own volition, its own brain, goes and solves problems. That's the idea of an agent, right? And that's a universal definition of a software agent as we talk about it today.
Correct.
Database agents are nothing but, they're the same thing, except we are basically trying to solve the operational problems of a database. When you talk to any seasoned DBA, they'll tell you the kinds of problems and the kinds of challenges that they deal on a day-to-day basis. They'd have to make sure that they're continually monitoring the performance of the system and figure out that, hey, the workload has changed. Maybe queries have changed, the data formats have changed or whatever, and what kind of indexes do they need? They have to keep tuning things, right? They have to monitor for performance posture and as well as security, compliance posture. There could be many other things in terms of repairs, security challenges, and much more. So we have basically built database agents to begin with, to make sure that all these kinds of challenges are continually monitored, rigorously analyzed on their own because we've given the right instructions. And then they assist you with the tooling that you need to go and solve the problems. So the way we do it is that, obviously we've been running relational databases for several decades. We know how to do that.
Yes.
And so we have a whole lot of information in terms of how relational database applications can get into trouble. They can create deadlocks for themselves. They can have blocking issues. It could be missing indexes. All kinds of issues, right? All of those things are basically encoded as instructions in a markdown file, and that basically becomes instructions. And the tooling is basically the connectivity and the telemetry of what's happening to a workload inside the engine. So we got a very rich telemetry, anonymized, obfuscated, without causing any security challenges. But we do have a lot of telemetry to help these agents that marry these instructions and these kinds of tools, and then they can go off with the help of any model, lots of great OpenAI models or whatever models that you may have. It works with all of that stuff and autonomously. And we're making sure that we're not stepping on the toes of the guardrails that the customers have, and yet at the same time add no operational tax. That's really the philosophy that we have.
Perfect.
Add no operational tax, but make sure that the customer is still at the steering wheel, right?
Perfect.
When they need to. It'll take some time, whenever you're getting into these autonomous behaviors, it's like getting into Waymo for the first time. Get used to it.
I couldn't get into a Waymo. In all transparency, yesterday we were getting the Uber and I'm like, okay, I'll take the normal Uber. So I know it takes time.
It's safe.
Thank you for attesting. But yeah, really, really well articulated between what an agent is and how agents really help, but also, protecting the guardrails and respecting what our customers already put out there. I want to give another plugin. So if you want to look at what we are exactly talking about, there are a couple of demos that Erin Stellato and Charles Webb talked about how to use data agents within databases. So check that out as part of the keynote yesterday. Now, going back, we talked about all the beautiful, shiny things that are landing. Let's take a step back and understand the reality of us DBA or a database developer. And there are many announcements that landed as part of the keynote yesterday, Shireesh. It got all the SQL community excited. Talk to us about what does it mean for reality in a day-to-day work perspective.
Yeah. Well, we totally recognize that there's a lot of work that the customers want us to do in terms of making their day-to-day lives easier, to your point. I want to begin by talking about SSMS first. SSMS is really the tool of choice, is
100%.
one of the most beloved management tools across all relational databases, across most of these enterprise softwares. SSMS has a huge following. It has millions of developers in DBAs.
I started my journey with SSMS.
Yeah, me too. And I think that is sort of something that's not lost on us. And we're going to continuously, very aggressively iterate it. In the recent times, we've been releasing lots of features on a very regular basis. SSMS 22 now has tons of new features. We've announced a lot of cool things. Simple things like, grouping objects in the Object Explorer by databases, by schema. It may sound simple, but it's incredibly important.
Yes.
When you have hundreds of different items, right? You can now just export your query results in the query result grid into your common formats, into Excel. Now, again, may sound simple, but super important. And the exciting one really is that a lot of customers have asked for SSDT project style things into SSMS. We got that as well working.
Wonderful.
And so developers can really be very effective in terms of managing their projects and all their scripts, everything that they need for schema management inside SSMS directly.
Perfect.
The biggest news, though, was bringing in GitHub Copilot inside SSMS.
Exactly.
We made it generally available,
Wonderful.
and that's a game changer. That's a game changer because, instead of really trying to debug things based on your own human skills or whatever, you really could go and ask Copilot. And once again, we're not trying to take the steering away from you. We're trying to assist you. And it's a co-pilot. It's
and also empower.
Absolutely. And so you could go into SSMS Copilot and start chatting about your data. You can ask it to go create any DTL stuff. You can ask even simple looking questions like, hey, why is my query slow? That may be a simple question, but it definitely can get incredibly hairy. It may be because of some chain of blocking events that you don't know and that you can't detect on the surface of it. But Copilot can go and dig all that stuff. And this is possible because of all the internal telemetry that we capture, and we fed all that stuff to AI that can really go and make life significantly easier. We've got some awesome momentum with Copilot capabilities inside SSMS. So that's about SSMS, but there's more to it. There are a lot of customers who ask for higher cores for SQL Hyperscale. Now, we announced 160 and 192 vCore support for Hyperscale. So that makes a big difference for workloads that need higher throughput. There are many customers who ask us for parity of SQL enterprise capabilities inside Fabric. We've announced SQL auditing, CMK at workspace level, vCore limits. We made it
These are
easier.
Yes.
for you to migrate from on-premises to Fabric directly if you are trying to consolidate all your estate. So these are all things that really make the life of a DBA, a database developer, easy on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So the other thing I want to touch on, definitely Copilot, GitHub and SSMS, it's big deal for any DBAs and developers. Now, I want to go back and let you finish on your thought about Copilot pilot. Talk to us about, just bring those things together that we are empowering our customers, and it can never replace what we are really truly bringing in.
Yeah, so you would see this in the database agents that we're introducing in the database hub in Microsoft Fabric. The way we are doing it is not to try and take the steering control completely away. We understand that you basically don't want to sort of trust AI directly in your production workloads. We totally understand that. And so what we are trying to do, the default mode, is to assist you with the right kind of informations that you need as you go along, and we will pop it in the portal, in the hub portal, or even in the VS Code, wherever you need. But we will never try to just run it on your behalf unless you sign up for that.
Okay.
It might be that you want to put it on training wheels, watch that really take over, and maybe watch it for several weeks, months, years, perhaps, sometimes, and we totally get it. So there's an enormous value because we are monitoring rigorously and just letting you know and assisting you. And when you're ready, you can just say, hey, I looked at these changes, I'm good, go run. We'll run it for you. But we need you in the loop as a default stance.
Correct.
But beyond that, we will definitely go and get that going. And I want to add one more point here, Sweta, is that it's not just about really us trying to write the instructions ourselves. We totally recognize that we have a lot of expertise in terms of these kinds of challenges, but we want to invite you in as a customer to go author these instructions, edit them, view them, perhaps build your own skills in addition to the skills that we have in the agent, and thereby really defining your own agent, right?
Yes.
So this is something that we're very serious about it, and hence we are creating a platform instead of thinking of it as a complete black box, right? So you definitely will have a lot more control here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on the statement coming out of keynote that really resonated well with me, and I'm sure it resonated well with many others. 2 databases, 1 notebook, 1 platform. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, so the thing that we're talking about here is that we have multiple databases, but we brought in SQL database and Cosmos DB together into Fabric. Right? And by bringing it in, what we have done here is to show the power of translytical applications inside Fabric. These are databases that have been there for a while, for more than a decade, and SQL has been there for a long. And you could do transaction applications very easily. With the kind of ETL pipelines that you may have, all the kinds of changes that you could do, you could definitely take that data into an analytical system and go do other things.
It's the next step.
What we have done here is to make that entire process, compress it into significant ease by just bringing in Cosmos DB and SQL DB directly into Fabric. Mirroring is built in. So the moment the data enters into any of these systems, you can gather insights.
Phenomenal.
Better yet, you could cross-join the data between SQL and Cosmos DB. So you could be putting in your transactions, your traditional payments, orders, and that kind of stuff in SQL for asset guarantees, rich functional queries. All that stuff goes into SQL. But if you want seamless elasticity, high availability, even if you're willing to trade off ACID with that of the scale, you could do it with Cosmos DB.
Yes.
Now, when these 2 databases are inside Fabric, both the database streams are independently getting mirrored. And guess what? You can go to the analytical endpoint in Fabric instantly as you're writing here without impacting any of your operational workload. At the same time, you can go to analytical endpoint and do a cross-join with not just with the tables inside a database, but with the tables and document collections across different databases, across different types of databases, because all of that flows into one lake in a common format. So, you take a notebook, connect these 2 things across these 2 databases, it's easy, right? It's magic, pretty much, right? It's zero ETL. You really don't have to worry about your operational overload and all that stuff. And there are many customers who use it because they don't want to basically impact their production workload to do these kinds of things.
Yes.
Instead, they can use the compute that's available in Fabric via one lake. So that's the story.
It's a great evolution because we saw DB links, how it was to connect, to do cross joins at one point. Then came ETL. Now we are in an era where you just land everything magically into one lake using mirroring, and
That's right.
All the engines are unplugged.
Zero ETL.
Perfect,
Yes.
perfect.
Yeah.
Now, I want to wrap it up with what is looking ahead, what's next for databases in the future with Fabric.
Yeah, so we totally are stoked about what AI can do in the era of sort of like the modern agentic solutions that we have here, and how it could totally disrupt the way that operational DBAs think about their day-to-day life. We want to make sure that you are going just beyond the usual things of, picking up the backup schedules, making sure the patching is going, etc. Those things we're going to solve. We will definitely be at it. We're iterating on it, and we're going to get that solved together with you. Let's work together to get that solved. Beyond that, I certainly think that we will be at a point where we want to really help DBAs solve even more thornier issues. We want you to chat with your query plans. For example, right? Query plans are these very complex pieces where any small change, any small detail can completely disrupt how you think about your query performance. And there's a lot of details in a query plan. Any query can generate multiple kinds of plans, and SQL has been at it in terms of pinning the right query plan, figuring out what is a query store, trying to really create a stability for that sake. And we figured how to chat with the data. We want to enable the kind of similar experience to chat with your query plans, for example, make it much more easier. That's just an example of how we want to evolve, assisting the database administrators to go really focus on their objectives instead of really trying to do the grunt work effectively, and then go beyond, right? And in addition to that, a few things that I would say, talking about the future of Fabric and databases in it, we are very committed to making sure that the SaaS experiences of databases in Fabric are really, sort of like advanced, mature, and beyond that, we have an opportunity to make it easier for you to have a very novel way of thinking about transactions and analytics in a database. Exactly. You do not want to deal with multiple endpoints. You want to have one endpoint. We are going to solve that problem.
Perfect.
Independently, whether the system is really trying to go heavy on transactions or in analytics, that's not your problem, that's ours, right? So we want to take that burden away, abstract it out, make it easier for you. So you'd see a lot more AI. You definitely see a lot more translytical stuff coming into Fabric. These operational burdens and these overheads that you may have, we want to make that as a thing of past, and make sure that we're not doing it by overstepping your security guardrails. We want to make sure that you have the control. We really want to be a co-pilot, not trying to take over that stuff, but assist you in bringing those kinds of capabilities. So that's really the gist of it. There's a lot more exciting things that are coming up across our databases, and and inside Fabric as well.
Phenomenal evolution, Shireesh. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and sharing all your insights. Do we have question for one? Okay.
So Shireesh, how close are you think that we are for the agent to be fully autonomous for DBA related activities?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be a phased evolution. I do think that we are not still at the point where we really can completely trust the ship the code into production that we don't see. We're not there yet, right? We're getting there. We're not there yet. Not just for DBAs, even for a regular simple application. Agents, coding agents, not DB agents, coding agents can help us really build code, but we still have a human oversight in terms of looking at it and doing the PRs. The SMEs need to really sign that and then put it into production. Depends on the application. Now, I'm not shipping my databases code like that, right? Having said that, we have gotten significantly ahead already. We are really at a point where we can increase our trust levels. We've gotten to the point where we can do regression testing on it much more easily these days, and we have really the ability to put the guardrails. And if the AI generated code passes those checks, we have a lot more confidence. I still have an SME looking at it before I put it into the production. I think it's a similar kind of evolution with DBAs. What we are really aiming is to basically make sure that all the usual grunt work stuff is taken care, right? Hey, can we take care of automating some of the usual things that you do? Can we take care of helping you pop up some usual production-related issues? Can we be there when you need in terms of debugging some of the thorniest issues? And connecting with your application. Now, this is the beauty of Microsoft Stack, right? We are really going and connecting the dots across Work IQ, Foundry IQ, Fabric IQ. We can connect all these dots, and I kind of missed talking about the future of Fabric IQ there, which is a big deal for databases. We are really going to connect all these pieces. So we'll have to go from solving these sort of grunt work issues to connecting it into the overall sort of overarching IQ stack before we can say, hey, we are fully autonomous. So I'm cautious in terms of saying that we are going to be fully autonomous, but the journey is absolutely, undoubtedly in that direction.
So one more follow-up question on the Fabric IQ side. Currently, we can jumpstart Bootstrap the ontology from semantic models. Is there a plan to bootstrap from Azure SQL databases as well?
That's a great question. Yeah. So what you can do today, like as of now, is to basically create the mirroring for SQL database. Once the data enters into the one lake, and then you can build a semantic model, you can pull up an ontology, and then it obviously the entire story works. We're gonna make it simpler. We're gonna make it simpler by basically, creating like, hey, can I pull the semantic model from the entity relationship sort of like understandings? I already have primary key, foreign keys. Can you bootstrap that right away? And then give me a getting started ontology, semantic model, upon which maybe you already have some ontologies, etc., some policies that you may have encoded elsewhere. So we're trying to glean all these informations without you having to do some of the initial work. But today you can do that today as is. Like, just the data goes into one lake, and then, you can already do all that stuff pretty easily. But yeah, it's a great question, Arvind. We're going to make the getting started simpler. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out. Thank you, Shireesh.
What a conversation. Everything you've been watching here was captured live at FabCon and SQLCon in Atlanta, from the interviews to the demos to the community insights that make these events so special. If you're into Microsoft Fabric, SQL, and the future of data, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And speaking of next, we're taking this show to Barcelona. FabCon and SQLCon Barcelona are happening this September 2026, and it's going to be packed with big announcements, deep technical sessions, and one amazing global data community. Hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to register and use code FABTV to save €200 off your ticket. As always, thank you so much for watching. Keep being awesome, and we'll see you in the next one.